The UFC have announced lots of fights. We've got the main event for International Fight Week. It's finally here. We've got the co-main event and a lot of the fights on the card, the main card, and we've also got UFC 319. But I'm going to start off with the biggest fight, which is 317. Ilia Topuria will face Charles Oliveira for the vacated lightweight title. That's right, Islam Makhachev has vacated because he will move up to fight Della Maddalena at welterweight for the title there as well. So, Ilia versus Charles, I think this matchup is very good, and stylistically, it'll be a fun fight to watch. There probably will be a finish because both of these guys have a great record when it comes to finishing the fight. Ilia is one of my favorite fighters, but so is Charles Oliveira. So, I will be upset when the fight is over. However, on the other hand, one of them has to be the champion as well. So, that is a good thing, I guess. But when people heard that it was going to be vacated, many were shocked, and I understand why, but I also don't understand why. When you think about it, there were many moving parts going into this International Fight Week announcement. We had to consider if Islam was going to move up, whether JDM won or not. JDM did win, so Islam's moving up. If Bilal would have won, maybe we would have got Islam versus Ilia. So I think there's lots of things to talk about, and I think the biggest thing is that because Islam said he wasn't going to vacate and now he has, it's kind of like, why? Was he maybe stripped? I think there is definitely a possibility that that did happen. However, I don't think the UFC did that. I don't think Islam deserved to be stripped, even though Ilia Topuria would have only fought for an undisputed title, in my opinion. If you're moving up after vacating your featherweight title, you're not moving up to fight for an interim, and you're not moving up to fight a contender. You're moving up to go for the undisputed gold. So for Ilia, I think that was a big factor, and I think it would have been bigger for him if he fought Islam. He wanted Islam, but in the end, he got Charles. I don't think it'll matter too much, though, because he is fighting for the title. Now, as for Islam Makhachev, I think the UFC had a few options, Going to Perth, I think, was a big one, and booking it for August, I thought would have been perfect. Going to Perth in August, I know it is very close to now. Maybe they already had something organized, but you could have done JDM versus Islam Makhachev, Volkanovski versus Movsar Evloev for the featherweight title as the co-main event. That is a massive card for Australia. Considering Australia have two champions now, they're going to come back down under, for sure. And they will. It's just a matter of time. The only reason why I'm talking about August is because it's no longer going to happen, because we've got UFC 319 between Dricus Du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. That is booked for August. UFC 320 is booked in Mexico, in Guadalajara, so it'll have to be 321, I guess, at the earliest if they want to come to Perth. But I think the issue you face with that is that JDM wants to be active and Volk want to be active. They both want to be active, so if you do come to Australia, maybe they've already fought, However, it is kind of booked up at the moment, so maybe JDM and Volk will get a bit of a rest, and maybe you could do 321 in Perth. I think that would be a massive fight. I think that would be a massive card. You can stack that card as well. You've got Dan Hooker, you've got Israel Adesanya, Steve Erceg, you can do Bam Bam making his comeback. There are so many fighters down here, New Zealand and Australia, that you can put on the Perth card, and it will sell for sure. That could be, honestly, Australia has potential to have the best pay-per-view cards every single year. That's not me being biased. It's just true. You've got Volk. You've got Whittaker as well. I didn't even mention Robert Whittaker, who you could put on that card. I know he's facing Renier Derrida, so maybe not on that card, but maybe next time the UFC come to Australia. There are so many fighters you can put on that card. So Perth, I think maybe the UFC fumbled that, not going in August. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they've got plans for it, and I just don't know. Now, going back to Ilia versus Charles, I think there is a path to victory for both. For Ilia, it's definitely going to be to keeping it on the feet. Although Ilia is extremely skilled on the ground, I think you'd be foolish to think that Oliveira isn't just as good, if not better. You do not want to get on the ground with Charles Oliveira. That is a dangerous game you're playing, and you're playing with fire doing that. So for Ilia, if he can just keep it standing, we know he has the knockout power. He's knocked out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway in his last two legends of the sport. Can he do it again? If he does it 3 times in a row, I think that is probably the best run anyone has ever been on in MMA history. 3 knockouts against 3 legends, and then maybe he goes and fights Islam Makhachev. Who knows? Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was Islam versus Ilia will happen. Initially, when JDM won, it was bittersweet. I wanted JDM to win, but I also wanted the super fight. Ilia versus Islam will happen. I know that. I know it will. Whether it happens at welterweight, whether it happens at lightweight, it will happen. That is because I think for the UFC, they know just how big of a fight that is. I do not think the UFC are going to fumble that. They will 100% make that fight. They know how big it is. If Islam beats JDM, who knows? He'll probably fight Shavkat. Maybe for Ilia, he moves up later on if he wins the lightweight title. We've seen Ilia in an interview before say his plans are featherweight, lightweight. Once he wins the lightweight title, move up to welterweight. He said that. And I quote, so for Ilia, if he moves up to welterweight, maybe we see the matchup at 170. But if JDM beats Islam, which I think is definitely possible, maybe Islam moves back down and fights the winner of Oliveira versus Topuria. Now, I'm saying all of this like Topuria is the champion. He's not the champion yet. Oliveira could still win. And for Oliveira, his path to victory will be to get it to the ground, I think. I don't think he's as skilled of a striker as Ilia Topuria is. He's a very well-rounded fighter, and he is good on the feet. The boxing isn't as clean or as crisp as Ilia Topuria's. So I think he needs to get it to the ground. I think he needs to finish it on the ground. So Charles versus Ilia, great fight, stylistically fun to watch. Now, the co-main event for International Fight Week is going to be Alexandre Pantoja up against Kai Kara-France. This fight has been anticipated for a very long time by many MMA fans. We thought it was going to get booked for UFC 314 in Miami as the co-main event for Volk versus Lopez. It wasn't. But on this card, we now have 2 title fights. And I think that's very important. I think for International Fight Week being such a big event, you had to have 2 title fights on it. So I think the UFC have done well. And another thing I want to talk about International Fight Week is they have covered their bases extremely well. They have meticulously thought this out. And they've booked Manel Kape up against Brandon Royval. Now, in the case, touch wood of course, in the case Kai Kara-France or Pantoja cannot fight, you've got Manel Kape or you've got Brandon Royval. One of them can step up to the plate. You've got them waiting in the wings. The same case for the lightweight title fight. Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano are waiting in the wings as well. In the case that something were to happen, of course, touch wood. But do I see Renato Moicano or Beneil Dariush maybe getting a title shot? Probably not. In fact, they'll probably look to someone else to step in on short notice. But that is there just in case. You know, we never thought Renato Moicano was going to fight for the title against Islam Makhachev. Back when he did, he stepped up on 1 day's notice and he fought for the lightweight title. So you never know. Things like that can happen, especially in this sport. Now, I want to talk about Pantoja because I think he may be one of the most criminally underrated fighters in the sport right now and potentially one of the best champions we've got. How often do you get a champion that says, no, I don't want to go for a double champ shot. I just want to stay and fight every single contender. I'll fight them 2 times, you know. I'll just keep doing it. I wasn't a fan of Pantoja in the past just because maybe he was the champion. I didn't like that. You know, he beat Steve Erceg, but Pantoja is brilliant. He really is. And when he beat Kai Sakura, that really got me thinking, wow, this guy is elite. Buzzcut Pantoja has made me a fan. I didn't really rate him that highly. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is actually a rematch. They fought back on The Ultimate Fighter many years ago. Pantoja was victorious against Kai Kara-France. And when you look at this fight, I think there are a few options as to how it could go. And I think one that I've been thinking about a lot is Pantoja by sub. I think he can submit Kai Kara-France. He's good enough. On the ground, I don't know about Kai Kara-France. But on the other hand, you've got Kai Kara-France by knockout. He has hands and he has power in those hands. I didn't think he was going to knock out Steve Erceg. I didn't think he was going to beat Steve Erceg. I thought Erceg was just going to piece him up, to be honest, and he shocked me. But the power he has in those hands is crazy, especially for that weight class. I don't think anyone in the weight class has that much power in their hands. So Pantoja could get knocked out in this fight. He definitely could. I've actually been one of Pantoja's biggest critics when it's come to his chin. I've always said I actually don't think he has a good chin. I just think he gets tired at the end of the fight, and I think he could get knocked out in the 4th or 5th in many of his fights. So maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, I don't know. That is the co-main event. We're going to move on to the rest of the card. We've got a middleweight bout between Paulo Costa and Roman Kopylov. Now, Paulo Costa's return. Okay, he's going to fight Kopylov, and I think this is a stylistically good matchup for him. Kopylov is actually more of a striker than he is a wrestler. We've seen him get tested in the wrestling department many times. I think for Paulo Costa, that's a good thing. I think if he can keep it standing, he could get a finish against Roman Kopylov. I just don't know if he's ready for that yet. You know, he's had a few losses. He lost to Sean Strickland. He's lost to Israel Adesanya in a title scene as well. Can he go back to winning? Hopefully. I think for many Paulo Costa fans, they'll want to see him win, of course. Going up against Roman Kopylov is a big step down, which I think is a good thing. So, you know, maybe it's a confidence booster. He beats Kopylov and then he's back up fighting higher rated contenders. We've got Beneil Dariush up against Renato Moicano. They just rebooked that fight. Fair enough, I wanted it rebooked. Maybe not for International Fight Week. I kind of wanted to see Mauricio Rufy up against Beneil Dariush, which kind of brings me to thinking about what other fights we could have had on International Fight Week, because I feel like we also could have had Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland. I feel like that would have been a sick fight. And I know MMA fans recently have just been asking for a lot. You know, we want Batman versus Superman pretty much. Izzy versus Strickland, yes, it's a massive fight. So maybe they're going to put that on another card. I actually think that will be the co-main event for UFC 318 between Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. Then we've got Brandon Royval up against Manel Kape. This is a massive fight, and I don't know why it's so far down. This has massive implications on the flyweight division. I think the winner of this gets the next title shot for sure. And I think for the UFC, it would be perfect if Kai Kara-France won the belt. Because if Kai Kara-France wins the belt and Manel Kape also beats Brandon Royval, Manel Kape versus Kai Kara-France, that fight may have the biggest hype in flyweight history. That fight is massive. Manel Kape and Kai Kara-France have been going at it for ages. They've wanted to fight for ages. If they finally got that fight booked for the title, that could be massive for the flyweight division. However, on the other hand, if Pantoja wins, I know I was saying earlier about how Pantoja doesn't want to move up. Maybe they'd go for a double champ fight. Maybe they'd do Pantoja versus the winner of Merab versus Sean O'Malley. And I think it would be ideal for the UFC if O'Malley won that. Then we've got Jack Hermanson up against Gregory Rodriguez. Robocop is back following his loss to Jared Cannonier. It's good to see him back, and I'm glad he is on a big pay-per-view card. I really am a big fan of Robocop. I think he's good enough. I was shocked when he lost to Jared Cannonier. I really was. I think Robocop, his cardio let him down. He can do a lot better than he did in that fight. And I think he's almost looking like one of the high contenders in the middleweight division. I know middleweight is stacked, but he's amongst some of the best. His striking is elite, and I think he can get back up there. Another fight I would have loved to see on this card, or another fighter, is Yuri Prochazka. I wanted to see Yuri Prochazka versus Carlos Ulberg on this fight. Apparently, Yuri Prochazka turned down a title fight against Magomed Ankalaev because of exams. Yuri versus Ankalaev, if that would have been the main event, like, I don't know. That's a pretty big main event, and it's a pretty big step to walk away from Alex Pereira. They offered it to him first, but after he said no, should they have gone to Yuri? I mean, Yuri is coming off an impressive win against Jamal Hill, but it's Pereira. And I feel like offering that fight to Yuri Prochazka maybe could have been interpreted as disrespectful to Alex Pereira. Now, that's not because Yuri Prochazka doesn't deserve the title shot. I think it's more so because of all the favors Alex Pereira has done the UFC and how many eyes he's brought to MMA since the short time he's been in the UFC. Oh my gosh, we haven't got a fight. Call Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira just says, Sharma, yeah, I'm in. So I think that's actually the big reason why the UFC haven't booked Ankalaev versus Pereira yet, for that very reason. Because if you get to a point where you don't have a main event, you call Pereira, you call Ankalaev, there's your main event. Big fight as well. But I also think they're waiting for UFC Abu Dhabi. Now, UFC 319, Dricus Du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev is the main event. So, I don't know. I think it's a good fight, and we all knew it was going to happen. Is it being booked too early? Maybe. Maybe that's just me being biased. Like I said, I wanted that Islam versus JDM fight booked there in 319. But this is a great fight. I think, of course, I've seen all the memes. Everyone's going to talk about, oh, Dricus just plot armor. That's how he's going to win. He doesn't actually have tactics. He just throws whatever. Chimaev, of course, is going to be going for the takedown. Can he take down someone as big as Dricus Du Plessis? He's massive inside the octagon. He's a very different fighter, stylistically as well, to the likes of a Robert Whittaker, who he just beat. So I don't know. And I think the talk in the press conferences and before the press conferences will also play a massive role in this fight in seeing who wins. Dricus Du Plessis has already started. We saw that Nasruddin Imavov is now going to be the backup fighter, and already Dricus is saying, yeah, I'm going to fight Nasruddin, having a go at the fact that Khamzat doesn't make it to fights. So Dricus will, of course, have that advantage, but I don't know if he'll get in Chimaev's head. We'll see. If he makes Chimaev angry, maybe Chimaev will try and stand and trade with him, which could be the idea for Dricus Du Plessis. Maybe he doesn't want him to go for the takedown and rather stay standing. So if he gets Chimaev angry, maybe he stays on the feet and tries to KO Dricus Du Plessis. But I think the likely outcome is that he will go for the takedown, and Dricus Du Plessis will just do what he does best and find a way to win. That's what he does. In his last fight, props to him. I did not expect him to outclass Sean Strickland for 5 rounds. That's exactly what I did, so I would not be surprised with an outcome where Dricus Du Plessis wins this fight in any manner. Submission, TKO, decision. Anyway, that is my take on the recent UFC fight announcements. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, please subscribe, and also drop a comment down below. I will answer every single comment in the comment section.